Greetings in Jesus' precious name. Thanks for joining us for another weekly edition of Let's Talk. Today we continue with the important topic of the family. This episode will answer the question we left hanging: if families lived better than compared to now. So fellow panelists, let's talk.
Isn't it true that families lived different back then to now?
Yes, indeed, I believe so. And as you were talking there, I still going back to those days when I was a little boy. I always knew that there was a father, there was a mother, there was grandparents. So in my mind, that was always the structure. I always knew that grandparents was always there because we always had to go on the weekend by our grandparents and spend the time. And there was basically those best time because grandparents would give you the candies, or would give you the toffees, the Shirley biscuits. When you go back home, you ain't getting none. The weekends to go by the grandparents was always looking forward to that. And I always go back to the structure in that father, mother, children. What Satan tried to do is try to break up that structure. Nobody can stop the sun from rising. Nobody can stop the moon from coming up or going down. That is God's order of the family. Now we are seeing that it's being torn apart, broken apart. We're seeing mother being with mother, father being with father. And that's what the structure of the home is like right now. Children going to school. They're saying, I have two mothers. I have two fathers. And it's mind-boggling because in my mind is that father, mother, children, and that was and still is the structure that God planned back then. Now we're seeing today that it is being broken apart. That's my take on that.
Sister Marijke, you knew your grandmother?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about life there, what you recognize in the relationship.
The comparison, my grandmother was a bit older because of when she had her children and when my mother had her children. And so my grandmother was the authority in the house because she lived with us. She was the one that looked after us in the afternoon when we came home from school because both my parents worked. Besides that, she was also an assistant in the church. She preached and she went around. The first things we learned, things from the Bible. And she taught us according to the Bible. And she was a firm, very firm believer. In Proverbs, when it says that you spoil the child if you spare the rod. And she used that rod and kept us fairly straight. And my mother continued it. From what my mother told me, her grandmother also had the same ideas. So she also grew up with that. But the grandmother was there. Nowadays, I notice the grandmothers are younger, still have to be working. So they're not there as that foundation that parents can give their children back to say, help us raise these children. The grandparents themselves are working because they themselves are very young also. Raising up the children is left now to others and non-family members. So they're not instilling the values of your family. They're instilling the values of their family. And I think that is part of where things are going wrong in our society.
Pastor Collins, I hear you talk a lot about your mom and dad, how that home was, and you're a product of that. Can you share a little bit?
Sure. The household was one where, of course, it was protection. It was one where we felt comfortable. It wasn't one of great abundance where we had way more than enough and obviously more than others and those type of things. But it's only now when you look back, you kind of realize that it was nice. Both parents were strict to the point where you need to do what's right, and that's simple. You could say I practically grew up in church, probably almost born in church, I don't know. But my father was a preacher and a deacon for many years. My mom assisted in church as well. I didn't know anything much else other than church and things related to church. I'm grateful for that because that allowed a foundation to be set that is solid. Something I could go back to every day. While growing up, I felt important to the point where I didn't feel my parents thought any other children were more important than us or as important as us. And I think that's still something that gives a positive effect today because it's not I didn't feel wanted or didn't feel appreciated or didn't feel like you did enough. No, I never had that feeling. And when you reach to the point where I myself was considering getting married, for me, taking that next step wasn't much of an issue. I remember discussing with my wife to be then, and she was like, but suppose it don't work and suppose it. And I was like, but look at the examples you have. For me, the example of my parents, I just thought it would go as good as that. I didn't see anything else. And I showed her that example and the example she was in as well, and others has give this a try. So that foundation allowed me to be comfortable, not to be afraid. Coming home after school was never a problem. It's not like, I don't really want to go home. No, straight home, not a problem. And I believe that foundation set by them then allowed me a good foundation to go forward in life.
I love this because we can share from different angles. Pastor Collins, I was not as privileged as you were to be brought up in a home where there was a mom and dad. I was brought up in a single parent home. Matter of fact, I don't believe that I could have gotten any better training from a mom and dad than what I got from my grandmother. I still believe that God, my wife, my grandmother, and then my mother. My grandmother, she did her best in raising me the best way she could. And I know that there are some single parents out there. I know that you are working so hard to make sure that your children are properly taken care of. And I would love to even say to you, if you are anywhere close to us, if we can assist you in any way of helping you to raise your children when it comes to things of God. We have a children ministry here where we will be more than happy to invest in your children to help you on your way with this. I know it's tough in days gone by. The mothers would stay home and the fathers will go to work. And these days it's so tough that the mom, she has to go to work to make sure she pay the rent, to make sure food is on the table, to make sure the children have clothes, to make sure the school fees are paid. And that is tough. I know it's tough. The time that needs to be spent with the children is the very same time that needs to go to work so that the children can have food to eat. It's tough. It's tough. But we're here just to encourage along the line. So families in the past, I must say, they surely live better than families today. Families in the past didn't have no Mercedes-Benz. When I was a little boy, the island that I came from, we couldn't have 10 cars. So when you see a car, don't laugh at me, Pastor Collins. So when you see a car, wow, you know exactly who that car was for. But things have changed over the years, and because we did not have all of those cars and those nice homes, we didn't have a lot of stress neither. We did not have the loans at the banks and had to do all these jobs. We would go to the ground and those type of things. But things have changed. Families in the past had more time to be together to help raise the children. Husband and wife had more time to be together to help raise the children. In these devotions that we are going to share, we want to share with you what has changed. This is what we want to talk about. What has changed? And to see what we can do to help bring things back on track. See what the scripture says to help families today. We know that families are going through tough times. The truth of the matter is, a great percentage of what you see looking good was like, if you really see the truth of it, is like when we had a pandemic, everybody wearing masks. I went to business places, there were people from the church with masks on, and I passed them and they go, Pastor, I couldn't recognize that person because they had on a mask. Many today are going through so much and they're not saying anything. They're hurting and need someone to encourage them. And that's why we are here. Today, Sister Marijke, what I have seen is that people spend a lot in weddings. When young people want to get married, what is surprising to me is that they find who they want to marry, they set the dates, they put out the invitations, and then they come for counsel. It's give me your stamp of approval for this now. And counseling, this is not compatible, or you shouldn't do this. Everything is done out there already, and they don't stop. So sometimes you can look at certain things and see, this is not going to work. So my advice would be to those who are thinking of getting married is to seek counsel first. Seek counsel first. So let me hear from you. What are some of the things that people spend a lot in today for the wedding? Because we have the wedding and we have the marriage, okay? And both of them need to be worked on. I have noticed that one is worked on and so much is spent on one, and the other is not worked on as much. And we need to pay attention to that. So tell us a little bit about the wedding.
Thanks for listening to this episode, and we hope it provided you with value. Please help us spread this word by subscribing, liking, and sharing this content. God bless you, and talk to you again soon.